Michigan is going to spring practice here soon as two-time defending Big Ten champion. We got Justin Rowe on the line, of course, blueby90.com, the Blue by 90 podcast. Justin, what's going on?
Not much here. Things are still good in Ann Arbor. As you said, nobody is not talking about the Big Ten championship still. So even though with a tough loss at the end of the year, the basketball team hasn't been killing it per se. So a lot of people are still trying to reminisce on that Big Ten championship run here in Ann Arbor.
Now, certainly compared to what we took in 2 years ago, coming off of the 2020 season, in which the coaching staffs are probably blown up to a large degree on both sides of the ball. It's been pretty quiet. There were some changes, of course, with Mike McDonald moving on last off season, but pretty quiet. Although Michigan moved on from a very difficult situation and certainly filled in the offensive coordinator role rather quickly from within.
Yeah, the Matt Weiss situation was a weird one, to be honest. It was something with computer access issues. They've left it very vague and not given out many details at all. But I think that Sharon Moore was the co-offensive coordinator this past year, managed the run game and the offensive line. Now he steps into a full offensive coordinator position, and he deserves it. There have been a lot of talks about Sharon Moore being a college head coach here in the very near future, and I think this is the next step for him. So I think that Sharon Moore is a great fit. The guys love him. I'll say that. He's obviously have been very successful with back-to-back Joe Moore awards for his offensive line as well. And so him taking over play calling with adding Kirk Campbell as a passing game coordinator as well, I think will bode well for Michigan's offense. Chris Partridge went down to Ole Miss for a while, had some struggles as an actual D coordinator, but he comes back as a position coach for the linebackers for Michigan. He was phenomenal on the recruiting trail while he was here in Ann Arbor, was a huge piece for Rashawn Gary and a few other different 5-stars, especially up on the East Coast. And so I expect him to be a big piece of that. And I also expect him to be a big piece of Michigan in their NIL efforts too. Him coming from the SEC, he's definitely known how they do NIL down there, which is different than a lot of the rest of the country. And I think he's going to bring some of that back up to Ann Arbor here.
All right. We got Justin Rowe here from Blue by 90 podcast. So check it out. How many are we typically dropping during the off season here?
During the off season, it gets a little spotty. We're not as consistent as you are. I'll say that. That's for sure. But trying to work in some basketball and some other sports. We've got baseball and softball starting here too. So we're close with those coaching staffs and players. And so we want to give them some love. We'll have one once a week here moving forward. And then, once spring practice, they start on Monday for spring practice. So I think we'll ramp it up here as some new information, as always leaks out once they get back onto the field.
All right, Justin, we're going to lean on your expertise to break down these positions. Here we go. The first one, I think some people are pretty familiar with who's going to start at quarterback. His name's J.J. McCarthy, everyone. That's settled. That's good to go.
You know what? It's nice to say that, to be honest. As a Michigan fan, how many springs have we been looking at? All right, we've got a QB battle, amongst some unknowns and not really knowing maybe some lackluster play from the previous season. So it's really, really good. It's a good feeling as Michigan fans to say, all right, JJ's our guy. He's a Big Ten championship quarterback. He's got all the tools, and he's got a year under his belt where he shined, I would say, most towards the end of the season. Obviously made a couple mistakes, costly mistakes in that college football playoff game. But still, if you look at it as an overarching look at his game, he really shined towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I don't think it's even a situation where, okay, he's the clear starter, but check, check, check in these areas, and he's missing these couple. There's really nothing that he doesn't do well. He just needs to improve and polish his entire game to become a truly elite quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just experience, in my opinion. It's seeing defenses for the second time around. It's going back and looking at that film. It's making sure that you work with your receivers in the offseason. I've talked with him, and that's one thing that he said specifically is last year he didn't throw with any of receivers until fall camp. And even then, it was limited because he still was returning. And he was splitting time with Cade McNamara for those QB1 snaps. So I think this spring and summer are going to be huge for JJ McCarthy to get in a rhythm with his receivers and get them on good timing and be working together and just get him comfortable as the leader of this offense. He until game 3, he didn't know he was the starter. So that's a big deal, in my opinion, in your head to go through a full offense and know that you're commanding this offense. And so we saw obviously a big ramp up of JJ in this past year. I see an even bigger step for him in 2023 to really put it all together and put him on the map, possibly in some NFL draft mock boards.
And now looking at the backup quarterback situation, and certainly nobody wants to think of a situation in which JJ McCarthy is going to be lost for a long period of time. But there are situations, even for championship teams, where the backup's needed for, a second half, or a guy needs, 2 weeks to recover. And the true championship teams have a backup quarterback who's good enough that there's going to be a drop off, but not significant drop off. He's not going to make big mistakes. He's going to make the right reads, do the right things. And they bring in Jack Tuttle from Indiana, who played a lot of football there. And I would assume that he's the backup, or is there going to be a battle for the backup spot?
I think there's a battle for the backup spot. Jack Tuttle is a guy. He's already told me that he wants to be a coach someday. And so I think he is a guy that's going to come in with a lot of expertise and a lot of coaching for JJ McCarthy, which, let's be honest, he didn't really have that last year. As soon as Cade McNamara lost that job, I don't think he was sitting alongside JJ saying, "You go, guy, go get him. Here's what I'm seeing." So I think that will help JJ a lot, especially Jack Tuttle coming from a different offense. He's seen all these defenses in the Big Ten before. So in my opinion, that's an underrated pickup for Michigan. But you look at Davis Warren, the kid is – He would have been a 3 or 4 star recruit if he had played his senior year, but he was unfortunately diagnosed with cancer, and so he didn't play a whole lot and was able to really perform at Michigan, get that walk on spot, and now he's been awarded a scholarship this year, which is incredibly exciting. So he's a guy that I would look at as very underrated, and he's got a good arm. I would see him as possibly vying for the starting job here in a few years. And I think him and Jack Tuttle are going to battle it out for that backup spot.
Talking up the Michigan offense, we got Justin Rowe on here from Blue by 90 to break it down for us as we move on to the running back spot. Blake Corum is arguably the best running back coming back in college football, but he missed the biggest games at the end, and Donovan Edwards almost ran for 1,000 yards just based on what he was able to do the last 3 games of the season. He was that good.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and I thought about this as Michigan elevated Sherrone Moore to offensive coordinator. It's like, what offensive coordinator steps into a role where they have a 5-star quarterback, a 5-star running back as their backup, and one of the Heisman finalists until he got hurt last year, and their starting running back? Like, that is pretty impressive. So this running back room is really phenomenal. For Michigan to bring back Blake Corum is something else. And I'll say this too, not only from a talent standpoint, but Blake Corum is a leader. He is a guy, and it's not vocals. He's not outspoken, but every single other player that watches him says he is no doubt the hardest worker in the weight room, and it shows and it leaks off into them as well. It gets to a point where he's working so hard that they need to get in there too. Now, he's still rehabbing that knee right now, but he is definitely getting to a point where he's going to be working on his craft, and him and Donovan are going to be a heck of a combo here in this 2023 season.
Do you expect this to be a situation in which maybe they're not alternating, but also Blake's not just the clear number one and Donovan barely plays? Obviously, they're going to get him on the field. He's a tremendous pass receiver, where there's maybe a 70-30 distribution of carry, something like that.
Yeah, I definitely think it'll be much more closer to 50-50 than it was this past year. I know Donovan, he's made it known in some interviews that he wants a good chunk of those carries. But I think that, they bring a little bit different vibe too. So I can see Michigan using them in some different ways. Donovan is a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So I wonder if they try and get them both on the field at the same time as well. But I would see it closer to that 50-50, maybe even like 60-40, 65-35, something like that, for the balance there in the backfield. And you look at what happened to Blake Corum at the end of the year, I think it's going to be good that they're going to lessen the load of both of those guys, so that the goal is by the end of the 2023 season, both those guys are healthy, going into that Ohio State game and hopefully a Big Ten championship and college football playoff as well.
Justin, we saw CJ Stokes get some work. Do we expect whether it be him or a third back to get meaningful carries?
Yes, CJ Stokes is a good young kid that's coming up, and I think that he's going to get the chunk of that third back carries that Michigan will run. They obviously run the ball a lot, so I think we will see him throughout the year. I don't see anybody else. Maybe a Kalel Mullings is getting in there. I'm not sure what side of the ball he's going to play. He does play some linebacker as well, and was in some short yardage situations for Michigan. But CJ Stokes is a really, really good running back. And so if Blake Corum were to have gone to the NFL, I would have had no problem with him stepping into a bigger role for Michigan here too.
Justin, you mentioned leadership ability when you talked about Blake Corum. Of course, they lose a big leadership guy in Ronnie Bell. When you look at the rest of the wide receivers, what do you see in regards to who's going to be the one, the two? Do you think that's pretty clear, or do you think there's going to be a pretty good battle for reps?
Yeah, I think the one, in talking leadership, Cornelius Johnson coming back is a big piece for Michigan, to have somebody that is the veteran in that room, that can say, I've been here for a long while and I know what's going on. He obviously balled out in that Ohio State game and was a huge piece of that win. And so having him come back is key for the continuity there. But I really think Michigan's depth at the wide receiver position, there is going to be a battle for snaps, and I think it's going to be 4 or 5 guys deep. You look at what Roman Wilson and A.J. Henne have been able to do at Michigan. They've been great. They're speedsters. They're guys that are going to get open. But you add in some young guys like Amarion Walker and Darius Clemens, Tyler Morris even as well. Christian Dixon can get in there too. We'll see what side of the ball Amarion Walker plays too. He's been dabbling with the defensive side of the ball as well. But I think there's a chance that he plays both ways. So there's a lot of depth at that wide receiver position. I wouldn't say there's that number one, like big time guy like Ronnie Bell was here. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how all that pans out with trying to spread the love there.
Got to have those tight ends at Michigan. They got to be integral to the passing game, and they have been. They have lived up to it. Luke Schoonmaker moves on. Colston Loveland is a guy that a lot of people fell in love with watching him play down the stretch. So he, I would assume, is number one, and then we go from there.
Yeah, it's funny talking to Colston Loveland, and he had no idea that he was going to all of a sudden become, by the end of the year, possibly the number one tight end, especially with Schoonmaker having some injuries and Eric Hall having a season-long injury, and now moving on to Iowa. So he got some really good experience for him in year one and showed that he definitely can be the guy. And so I expect him to put on a ton of weight, become much more athletic and experienced, and he is going to be a really key piece for Michigan in this 2023 season. But they also added A.J. Barner from Indiana as well, who's been a key piece for them in their offense. So Michigan going to the transfer portal there to have some depth at the tight end position. And then we saw Max Bredesen there this past year as well. I think he's going to dabble in the tight end as well as the fullback position. Michigan hasn't really had a true fullback in a while. And so I think there's going to be a lot of interesting pieces there. But Michigan, as you said, they love their tight ends. And I expect to see both Loveland and Barner in there quite a bit, getting some love.
Talking maize and blue here at the Voice of College Football. We got Justin Rowe on the line, blueby90.com. Check out his work. And, of course, Michigan going back to the practice field here in the next few days, actually, in Ann Arbor. Well, we give a lot of love here because other people don't to the offensive line. So love talking offensive line, giving those guys, again, they deserve it. They do the dirty work, and they make it all go. And Olawatimi was one of those guys that actually, I'm just like any other fan. I watch the game and I watch the ball. But he was one guy, and especially when you watch the replays, it's like, okay, he's the best. He's the best in the nation. They lose him. They have a few other losses along the offensive line. So is there going to be a lot of mixing and matching and work to do along the front, or do they have a pretty good read on what's going on?
You lose a lot in what Michigan had, that's for sure. With Olu, with Ryan Hayes, those are guys that are key pieces, and the NFL thinks so too, because they're mocked up to go pretty high in that draft. And so, as you said, I think this is what makes Michigan go, is this offensive line. So it's going to be really, really important that they get this right in filling those gaps. And so what they did was they went to the portal. It's funny because Michigan, before this past season, really hadn't dabbled in the portal much. They had lost guys, big key pieces to the portal more than they have gained. And so this offseason, though, they really went to the portal for some big additions. And one of those is Ladarius Henderson from Arizona State. He, I believe, is going to start at that left tackle position, and he is going to be a big piece for Michigan to add it alongside Trevor Keegan and Zach Zinter. Getting both Keegan and Zinter back is phenomenal. Both of those guys thought about leaving for the draft, could have went and gotten, they definitely would have been drafted. So getting both of those guys back is great for that continuity there. And then adding Drake Nugent as well. He's a transfer that's coming in too. So him stepping in at center. And I think, I believe he'll be the starter, but I do think that Greg Crippen and some of these other guys will have a shot at least at that center position too. And then you have Carson Barnhart, who won over that starting job by the end of the year. Him and Trente Jones had battled it out all year. They're going to do it again. And I think Trente will probably be one of those, the sixth guy on this rotation when you have some injuries. He can play at multiple positions as well. So listen, back-to-back Joe Moore Award winners for sure. Maybe they're the leader again. I don't think it's crazy to say that. They're definitely 1, 2, 3 probably in the Big Ten for offensive line, even after losing a lot of key pieces. So with Jerome Moore as the offensive coordinator, I imagine that they're going to run the ball just as much, if not more, than they have in the past. I see this offensive line still dominating here in 2023.
Obviously, Justin, you talk to these guys on a regular basis. They've had the news conference since Moore was announced. Moore replaces Weiss, who replaced Gaddis. Do you see any tweaks to the offense, or why mess with a good thing kind of concept here?
Listen, I mean, Jim Harbaugh is totally the stubborn guy of, I've won back-to-back championships by running the damn ball. Why would I do anything but that? And so I expect that to be the staple of it. That's for sure. And especially with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards in that offensive line, why not? Why not? And I kind of love it because it's essentially going against the grain of the rest of college football, which has turned into the pass-heavy spread. And so that's so classic Jim Harbaugh to say, I'm going to do it my way and we're going to do it well. But I look at that, and I also look at J.J. McCarthy's legs and arm, and I see all right, you got to use that talent as well. And so I think that as much as they're going to run the ball, I do see them looking at what happened in the second half of that TCU game and in that Ohio State game, even the Big Ten championship too. All right, JJ can sling it. Let's use that arm as much as possible. And so I see them doing that a little bit more with the run game still being the staple of this offense.
Justin, I don't know if you noticed this week, Ohio State canceled its series coming up with Washington in 24 and 25. So I certainly posted a video. I tweeted out, had a little fun with some Ohio State fans that have had a lot of fun with Michigan's non-con schedule for 2 years to say, because Ohio State's not going to be able to fill that spot with a big time team. They're going to have to find a group of 5. There aren't big time schools that have an opening in 24. Right. It's only a year and a half away. So it's going to be Arkansas State or whoever. So they're going to have a bad non-conference schedule in 24. So,
there you go.
All the abuse that you and the Maize and Blue have taken over these non-conference schedules.
The karma always comes back. It does always come back around, right? And I don't know all the details of why it got canceled and all these things and blah 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 blah. But it is a little. It's fun to poke back at the Ohio State fans and say, hey, pull up the receipts and see what you had to say last year around this time. But I saw some people being like, we should have Georgia for that game now. I'm like, oh my God, you have no idea how this works, do you? If you think Georgia's coming up to Columbus on a year and a half notice, we got bigger issues to talk about. But it is. Listen, you look at Georgia's schedule now, you look at what Ohio State's schedule will be, you look at what Michigan's schedule is going to be, it's like 11-0 versus 11-0 to go see 12-0 Georgia in the playoff is like, I don't want to say inevitable, but it seems like the odds-on favorite for that to happen again.
And I'll say the same thing toward the Ohio State move that I said toward the Michigan move, even though I made fun of Michigan's schedule too. There's no incentive. The way things are set up, there's no incentive to schedule anybody.
I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Until the NCAA changes things, why would I get penalized for losing a game and I don't get enough credit for winning a big game against a Washington or, fill in the blank of any Power 5 team, right? That's a solid competitor. I don't get enough credit for that. And I get knocked down. If you lose that game, you're almost out of the college football playoff race from the get-go and have to go undefeated in conference. So I couldn't agree with you more. Until they change something, I would do what Michigan's doing and Ohio State's doing every single year. It means more money. It means more championships. It means ultimately better success for your school.
And there's also a conspiracy theory out there because Michigan UCLA canceled just about 2 years before it was announced USC UCLA to the Big Ten. And of course, Washington, Oregon want to join the Big Ten, that maybe they see a conference set of games coming up.
That would be fun. That would be fun. I know you're solely football here, but I'm just thinking about like a USC UCLA like 9 p.m. game there on Tuesday night in basketball or something like that. It just sounds miserable. I don't know.
It's a nightmare for the non-revenue sports that have a 50-game softball season.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You're going to go out there for one series. You got to leave on Wednesday or something like that to get back Sunday, adjust to the time change. The logistics of it, I think
the football from a travel standpoint is the least of anyone's concern because it's basically a one-off or one game, and it's not going to affect it that much. So, Justin Rowe, Blue by 90, breaking down the Maize and Blue for us. Justin, hopefully we can have you back to talk defense.
Absolutely. We'll be back and we'll keep talking. Looking forward to these boys getting back on the field and having some football. We've gone 2 weeks without football being played after the Super Bowl. Not even, and I'm already craving it,